So, you want to save the world with clean energy? Make money doing it? Confused about the economic and technical realities of residential and commercial solar, batteries, heat pumps, EVs? Want the real-world scoop on new energy technologies, not manufacturer hype? Then tune in to the Weekly Energy Show, hosted by Barry Cinnamon. Insights from Barry's 40-plus years in the solar and energy industry will help you understand the future ways we'll generate and consume energy. And now, here's Barry.
Welcome to this week's Energy Show. Now, in case you've been under a rock, March is Women's History Month. And we talked in our company marketing department about a podcast on this topic. And I looked around, it's pretty easy to do because women are so involved in our energy transition, not just in solar, but in batteries and the hydrogen economy and policy and electrification and manufacturing. I could go on. I better stop now. But what's interesting is that when I kind of look around the solar and the storage industry, women are not very well represented on the construction side of things. It's just construction in general. But one industry leader immediately jumped into my mind. So it's my pleasure to have Jeanine Cotter, President and CEO of Luminalt Solar, as a guest today. And just going to go through a little bit of background. She's on the line, so the video's not working, so I can't see her blushing. But Jeanine co-founded Luminalt in 2004. She's built the company into the leading solar and battery contractor in San Francisco. And believe me, San Francisco is not an easy place to work. If I have service issues on my solar in San Francisco, I don't live there, I rent out a house, I'm going to have Luminalt do it. It's just a really hard place. But she's also very active on the policy side of the industry. She's on the board of directors of the California Solar and Storage Association. She's the VP of the executive committee. She's also a member of the Workforce Investment Board in San Francisco. And here's a unique bit of solar background. Jeanine's also a licensed California attorney and was recently reelected to the CalSA board of directors. So welcome to the show, Jeanine.
Thank you. Thanks. And I was just elected the chair of the Workforce Investment Board. So I'm delighted to tell you that is workforce development, as you know, is a really important component of running a thoughtful solar company or any company.
Yeah, and any company in a city as diverse as San Francisco. So, well, that kind of gets us started here. Tell us a bit about Luminalt, your products, services, their customers. Give us an overview, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks very much for the introduction. I was blushing. We did start in 2004. My husband, Noel Cotter, who has recently retired, he did his first solar system in 1981. It was a 50 kilowatt battery backup system in Ireland, on Fota Island. And he, in the early 2000s, really wanted to get back to doing something that he loved. And so he said, let's start a solar installation company. And I said, okay. And we did. And we both brought to Luminalt very different skill sets. And I have grown and learned over the last 20 years more than I ever thought was possible. And so we today are a company of just over 40 folks. Our products are solar and battery energy storage. And, that is clearly in our DNA because Noel's first system was in 1981. Solar with battery energy storage. They pair quite nicely together, as you know. Our market area is pretty much close in Bay Area, and our customers are really terrific, and we're really blessed to have people that are committed to electrification, climate mitigation, and a number of them really are interested in going with a locally owned organization like our own and like yours.
Well, that's one of the most amazing solar startup stories I've heard. And I also know that you're on the Workforce Development Board, but very passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Tell us a little bit about how you built that into Luminalt's DNA and culture.
Well, that came through Go Solar SF, which was a San Francisco solar program that provided an incentive if one worked and participated in a workforce development program. That was a program that was started under then Mayor Gavin Newsom. And the idea was that solar was a relatively new technology, and San Francisco was not picking up adoption nearly as much as the surrounding areas for a variety of reasons. And what San Francisco saw was that there were, and this launch was 2008, so there was a lot of people who were out of work, a lot of very talented people that could really transition into solar quite easily, but it also, there was this opportunity to get individuals in the solar industry at a beginning level right before it was going to grow. And so there were workforce development, community-based organizations that trained individuals who were identified as having barriers to employment for a variety of reasons. And those folks became eligible to be workforce development certified through Go Solar SF. And so very early on, we hired a variety recruited through Asian Neighborhood Design, young community developers, the San Francisco Conservation Corps, and other community-based organizations. And today, some of our most senior crew leads, our crew manager and our VP of operations, all are individuals that started at Luminalt because they were recruited through Go Solar SF.
One of the best feelings that I get running a solar company is, for many, many years, is just seeing how these young people, these underprivileged people, these people that might never have had a really great job, they come to work for us, and they get married, they have a family, they get a house, and they end up doing really, really well. And I'm quite proud of that, as are you and many other people at CalSA, because it is a really good career. And it's got such, even right now, this is 43 years after you started up Luminalt, but we're just at the very early stages of the growth of this industry and technology. But one of the things that affects that growth rate and affects sales is policy. How have you managed to navigate the crazy changes in solar policies in California and on a federal level?
It is an evolving landscape and one that has not always been easy to maneuver through. When California makes significant policy changes, it changes the character of our work in many ways and changes the character of our client. And the most recent changes in 2023, in which rooftop solar was really impacted in a really unfortunate way by decisions by the California Public Utilities Commission, that caused our client base to become folks that, and I think also because interest rates are so high, to be people who were really committed to the idea of solar and wanted a reasonable return on investment, but were not deterred by the changes that were made in net energy metering. And so I think one of the things that I have learned throughout the changes is that how one designs and installs a system and the equipment that one selects oftentimes is driven by policy as much as it is by what would make sense absent that policy.
Yeah, it's really, really hard to keep up with these changes in policy. And, consistently for me over the past, almost 25 years is the investments we make in, the California Solar and Storage Association, previously CalSIA, and then, also for many years in the National SIA, is those organizations are the ones that are lobbying for the success of our business. And if there's one message I'd like to send out to everybody listening to this podcast is if you're in the solar industry, you really have to make sure that you're contributing to both your local and perhaps your national solar organization, because that's really going to help get good policy going. But as you and I both know, Jeanine, being involved also gives us some insight and advance notice on what's happening. So we're not always like, boom, surprised that, oh, heck, on April 15th, we can no longer be under net metering. And, because we've been engaged and contributing to CALSA and helping, we had 6 to 9 months of advance notice that something was going to happen and it might not be great. That's how we learn about the changes in policies that are coming down the pike.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And also just to be a really thoughtful, well-informed solar professional, it's really necessary to understand what the different policy changes are and wrap your head around it so that you can be responsible and thoughtful in your design, in communicating the benefits of a solar and storage system. So CALSA has done a phenomenal job, and the amount of time and effort each you and I put into it is better for the industry, but it's also, I've learned so much, and it's better for me personally because I've learned and grown, and it's better for the organization that I started and that I'm committed to and have worked in for the last 20 years. And my colleagues are members of committees, and the investment of time and commitment and that sort of sweat equity, as well as the dollars that we contribute, actually come back to us in really being able to participate in trying to shape better policy so that California has a sustainable conversion to clean energy source that is distributed and helps us mitigate climate and helps reduce the cost of the grid and helps us be more resilient and keeps jobs locally in the communities where those systems are built.
Yeah, it all makes so much sense. It's like a triple bottom line. That we're helping the industry, we're helping our companies individually, and we're also helping the people that are on our team that are participating. And you touched on a point that I got to do more of this, is make sure that people on my team, if they're so inclined, are active in CALSA on certain committees, because every organization like CALSA needs all the help they can. We're kind of talking very high level. Let's kind of drill down and zoom in on the map into, I'm just thinking about a map of San Francisco. What are the biggest challenges being a contractor in a big, dense city like San Francisco? Let's talk about what you've mastered in order to be successful there.
Well, unlike many places, parking is challenging. Finding parking, we build up as opposed to building out. Many of our buildings are connected to other buildings. The building stock for the most part is old. So there's a lot of diversity in the types of buildings. There's a lot of flat roofs, which is distinct from a lot of other locations around the Bay Area. Getting panels up 3 stories can be hard.
I just think about being on the roof of in my house in San Francisco, getting that constructed, and everything you mentioned was always a hassle. How has it been working with PG&E on electrical side and the interconnection side? Because you mentioned that the houses are all kind of close together and the meter, may not always be that accessible. How do you address that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we also have a lot of multi-family housing and tenants in common, so meter labeling is not always perfect. Sometimes we've discovered that one neighbor was paying for somebody else's electric bill. So there's all sorts of discoveries that one finds through PG&E. But, PG&E goes through cycles of interconnection being extraordinarily difficult and interconnection kind of moving relatively smoothly. Right now, it seems to be moving a little smoother than it has in the not so distant past. Main service panel upgrades and new service continues to be really challenging. Are you finding that as well?
How many years does it typically take, and how many hundreds of thousands of dollars? No, just kidding. But yeah, it's always been a nightmare. The overhead stuff, six months maybe, that's an average. Anything underground, it's 1 to 2 years, and
or longer.
Or longer. Yeah, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, it's really, and the other piece that has really reared its head that is very challenging. And I'm not sure if this is more challenging in San Francisco or if equally challenging in San Francisco as in other locations is the gas riser situation where where the home had its gas meter placed next to where in its electrical meter where PG&E told us or told the homeowner it needed to go or the contractor that it needed to go. And oftentimes they're located in places that are not okay for us to be able to install solar. And that issue is coming up a lot.
Wow. And you get no sympathy from PG&E, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, I can understand their concern about natural gas being piped into people's homes and sparks and the concern about safety. And I appreciate that PG&E is considering safety concerns. But electrifying a household and moving towards electrification is impeded when people have to invest tens of thousands of dollars to be able to do something to electrify if they have to first deal with paying to fix where their gas riser is relative to their panels.
Wow. I mean, we haven't encountered that, but that's really, really hard to address. You're talking about a lot of underground work and a lot of digging. How has the San Francisco building department been these days?
The San Francisco building department has always blazed its own trail. It's quite different than other AHJs. There's a level of professionalism on the electrical inspector side that is really good, but it is hard to get things through the building department. It is particularly challenging with San Francisco Fire and San Francisco Fire's concerns around lithium ion batteries at this juncture. And so what should be a relatively simple permit under Solar App has to be a building permit in San Francisco. And that means you go through all of the requirements for a regular building permit. It's not a trade permit. And it is expensive and requires a lot of resources, both by the city and by the contractor.
Yeah, so you'll spend 3 to 6 months getting that permit, spend thousands of dollars to put in a 13-kilowatt hour battery, and then right behind that, they're driving in their car with a 100 kilowatt hour battery, and it's an instant, there's not even a permit. It is kind of ironic how that works out.
Well, actually, it's interesting that you say that there's not even a permit. I think that one of the things that deeply concerns me is that the more difficult it is for somebody to get a permit, the more we drive people to move forward without getting a permit. And Luminalt and Cinnamon Solar are very ethical, work within the confines of our building departments and our authorities having jurisdiction. Not everybody does that. And I think that we risk pushing people to install things in ways that don't get permitted because it's so incredibly burdensome and expensive.
Yeah. I mean, we just have a bright red line on that. It's like, we will always get a permit. And if you're not going to pay for the permit and make the necessary upgrades, then we're just not going to do the job. And it's just always the way it's been, and it keeps us out of trouble. And it means that once in a while we lose customers, but that's just the price you have to pay to run an ethical business.
It is the right thing to do, but from a policy perspective, from a building department's perspective, and from a fire department's perspective, I would wish that they would think about the impact that the decisions that they make on how difficult it is to make your way through getting a permit impact the people's ability to move forward.
So, Jeanine, what are Luminalt's popular products, and how has that product mix changed over the years?
That's a very good question. So we've been a Sun and Power installer since 2007. And so when SunPower moved to the integrated AC module, we moved to the integrated AC module. And so we installed exclusively SunPower for a very, very, very long time. And then paired the SunPower Equinox system with the Tesla Powerwall. Like many others in the industry, we are moving back to DC panels and string inverters. And the release of the Powerwall Plus and now the Powerwall 3 is going to really drive that, because using an AC panel in that ecosystem just doesn't make sense anymore,
Yeah.
because you're losing efficiency and increasing costs.
No, it's interesting how these technologies kind of wax and wane.
Yeah.
And as we try and, with the change to the net billing tariff, and there's just so much pressure to put in a less expensive system and put in batteries, some companies like Tesla have done an extraordinary job of streamlining that. That's going to be a very big product. So specifically to San Francisco, what advice do you have for people in San Francisco or in the San Francisco area who want to put in solar and a battery? Just what do you think?
Well, I would ask that they look towards a number of the really excellent local companies that are based in San Francisco when they consider going solar. San Francisco has some really long-standing and relatively newer companies that are really good at what they do. We do an analysis of permits in San Francisco every year, and it's pretty surprising to see how many companies come into San Francisco and will do sort of one or two jobs and then aren't back, and we don't see them pulling permits again. And for consumers that buy systems from those folks, I worry about their ability to have any maintenance done, or if an inverter goes out, how long is it going to take to get somebody out? Or if the monitoring isn't working really well, how do you get somebody out there to troubleshoot?
You hit on a really, really good point. The biggest advantage of a local company, in addition to knowing where to park and address the ticket problem, is making sure that they're going to be around to provide the service. And it used to be there wasn't a lot of service required, but when we switched to microinverters and optimizers, then for some reason the service requirements went up. I expect they're going to go down again with, now that we're not putting as many electronics on the back of the panels and the panels are more reliable. But still, a battery system is very likely to need service, and I strongly would recommend anybody who's looking at putting in a battery system to work with a local company that's been doing this for a while. In San Francisco, that's Luminalt.
Yeah. Thank you. And, I think that is, and where you're located, it is Cinnamon Solar. The value of having somebody that works with building departments, understands what the constraints are, what can be done, how you can design a system and optimize the equipment that is being deployed is huge. And that value is critically important for the long-term operation of a system and for the resiliency of that system. There's no great substitute for experience and the knowledge that's built up over years of doing this work.
Yeah, it's knowledge that is not in a textbook, especially when it comes to maintaining systems. I've got an old SMA inverter. I have old SunPower panels. What do I do when the inverter dies? What are these little wires on the back? It's just so important. So that's for people who are interested in buying or installing solar and storage. But what advice do you have for people who want to get into our industry? And we used to define it as solar, and now it's solar and storage, and now it's electrification. What do you recommend?
Do it.
That's a Nike answer.
This is such a vibrant industry. There's so many different pathways. There's so many different jobs. I find it really exciting to do something that matters, do something that impacts the climate, do something that creates quality jobs, do something that is meaningful and has longevity and creates impact. when we build a system, that system is going to operate for decades. And that's pretty exciting. And as my colleagues and I bike or walk or drive around the city, we get to see our work. And it's pretty exciting.
It's funny you mentioned that because I bike to work pretty often, and it's just amazing over the years how many more solar panels I see on the way biking into work.
Mhm.
And then I'm always like kicking myself. It's like, why didn't we put those in? But I'm just happy that there's many, many more people putting the systems in. So do you have any special advice for women on how to navigate the traditionally male-oriented construction industry?
You're hearing a couple of installers leaving the warehouse right now, women
Wait,
as well.
yeah, that was really good. You did that.
It was really good that my colleague yelled out goodbye.
And I'm asking the question, like, how do you navigate the traditionally male-oriented constructions? Right here, female workers saying goodbye at 5:48.
Yeah, and you say goodbye. Well, I think there's all sorts of different positions in solar, and the field provides a lot of opportunity and a lot of opportunity for professional growth and knowledge and learning multi-craft trade. And so, solar brings with it all sorts of different specialties that one needs to learn that are associated with our craft. And so you're building rack, you're doing electrical work that is related to generation, you're doing load panels, you're doing carpentry. I mean, it's so multidisciplined. It's a really great way to learn how to do a bunch of different things around the construction of and the building of anything, really. But it is a unique craft in that it is multi-craft. And so there's so many different ways that somebody can come in and learn how to do solar. I have heard from women in the past that they were concerned about physical strength. And my colleague Pam Kwan once said, well, a solar panel roughly weighs the same as a toddler. And that's true. Like if you can carry a child, you can carry a solar panel.
Yep. I used to be able to carry solar panels, but they've gotten too big and I've gotten too old. When I look at solar companies, they're construction companies, yes, but in many cases, more than half of the positions at the company, don't require wearing a tool belt or those skills. Even in more, traditional construction. So solar, I think, is even better in terms of spreading around those opportunities. But, look around my company, I'm sure your company too, lots and lots of opportunities for women, and, they're getting really good pay. 100% or 110% more qualified than a lot of the men looking for those positions.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's certainly true. I have a special place in my heart for women that choose a profession that is not been historically aligned with being female. And construction and working in the field is an area in which there is not a huge amount of female representation. And women have the capacity and have the ability to be trained and have all of the attributes that one would need to be a well-seasoned and well-trained solar installer.
Yeah, I totally agree. In a lot of ways, even better qualified with some of those other skills. How did you come up with the name Luminalt?
My daughter was in Latin class.
I never took Latin. What does it mean?
Lumi is for light and alt was for alternative.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool.
And she was 15 at the time, my daughter Claire.
Wow. Latin would have been a good language for me to learn, but I could barely get through some of the Shakespeare plays. But anyway, all right. So what do you do for fun? You mentioned bike riding and
I do love to bike ride. I don't bike ride as much as I should or would like to. I live close to Ocean Beach, and so one of my most favorite things is to walk down to the beach. I love snowy plovers. I love watching people in the beach. And then weekend before last, when I went down, there were a number of women, 13 to be exact, that ran past me and into the ocean, and they invited me to go for a swim. So I'm hoping to take them up on that in the not too distant future on some weekend. But, the natural beauty of San Francisco and around San Francisco, I love to walk, I love to hike, and I have an extraordinarily wonderful family that is pretty tight. And I have 3 children, and I love every single one of them, and I love to spend time with them. And I have a beautiful godson and his sister and their mother that I really enjoy spending time with. And I do a lot in terms of civic engagement, and that's really important to me because I want San Francisco and the Bay Area, where I was born in Oakland, to be a better place. I want it to be better as a result of all of the work that we do.
The fulfillment that you're experiencing is just coming through in your voice from all those elements and your enthusiasm. And I'm really impressed. I'm really jealous. And basically out of time. So that's all the time we have on this week's Energy Show. Jeanine, terrific having you as a guest on the show. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. If you missed any of today's show, you can always go to our website at energyshow.biz and listen to the podcasts. Thank you.